Hello everyone, it's Old Guardian here. Last night, interesting thoughts about the latest patch were published by a Blizzard game developer, Aleco, on Twitter, so I figured it would be really interesting now that we have 1 day of data about the new patch, to see what was the logic behind all the changes with Blizzard, and does it look like they're accomplishing what they set out to do. Well, these thoughts were published on Twitter and on Twitlonger. You could of course criticize that. Blizzard information is very difficult to come by. Usually you have to go through various sources to get first-hand statements from Blizzard instead of just going to the website or seeing it on the client. But I consider these to be more like institutional failures. Blizzard as an institution is very opaque. It's very hard to break through that. But individual developers, there have been many Hearthstone developers who have done a lot of work in trying to break through that opaqueness and give information to people. And even though they have to resort to ways that are not necessarily optimal for distributing that information, that's hardly something that individuals can be criticized for. So the latest member of the Hearthstone team trying to add some openness to Blizzard is Aleco, and let's take a look at what Aleco has to say. Thoughts on the latest patch. The balance patch is here. In this thread, I will dive a bit deeper into the philosophy and logic behind these changes. Dekkster and I wrote the official patch notes together, so please check those out before reading this thread if you haven't already. This patch is a unique one in Hearthstone's history. First, we accidentally previewed the patch last week when we posted the wrong build, which giving players some time to react to the league changes and speculate about what they mean. Yeah, Blizzard has really lost a lot of attention to detail. There are more and more, always mistakes. There are tons and tons of mistakes when they publish stuff, and there's lots of bugs. The number just seems to be increasing. So there's definitely some sort of institutional issue with the processes used at Blizzard, which results in poor quality time and time again. But that is neither here nor there. That's not really the main gist of this one. Secondly, this patch features a lot of changes. For standard, there are 4 nerfs and a whopping 22 buffs. I've seen some discussion online around how some players are worried to see this high volume of change, and there's some concern that big changes might make things worse since they are enjoying the current meta. Yeah, sure they are. I've also seen some discussion about how this patch feels like it's coming out of an awkward time while the meta is still developing. I'd like to address both of these concerns. Alright, go ahead, let's see what you have to say. In regards to the health of the current meta, we're very happy with how the top classes landed after launch. We're only doing 4 nerfs this patch, and all things considered, these nerfs are fairly light from a power level perspective. We hope these nerfs will do more to impact how it feels to play against the best decks than it does to drag down their power. And yeah, looking at statistics, this is a valid statement. There have not been very big outliers in this expansion. There have not been very dominant decks. Control Shaman probably was the most dominant deck before the balance patch. Nothing was really able to challenge Control Shaman particularly well, but other than that, there just wasn't that much of anything. As for the nerfs themselves, 4 nerfs indeed. So there's the Hunter nerf. Hunter nerf doesn't look like it did anything, so nothing happened to Hunter. But the other 3 nerfs definitely have had an effect. The Celestial Alignment nerf, it looks like it completely killed Celestial Druid, which was the expected result, and I suppose that was the desired result, even though it's not really elaborated on here. The Vile Library nerf made it so that Vile Library is no longer the best card in Imp Warlock. It's still a decent card, but it took down the power level of Imp Warlock quite a bit actually, more so perhaps than I even expected. Imp Warlock is still playable, but it became weaker. And then there's the Shaman nerf, the Snowfall Guardian. And Snowfall Guardian, it really wrecked that card. It was one of the best performing cards in Control Shaman prior to the nerf, and now it's one of the weakest cards in the deck. Whether it's still good enough to include in the deck, though, that's another question, and it might still be, because stalling the game is still a very useful ability to have. But Shaman just lost that big swing turn, so that was quite effective actually. Also, it was very needed, because Control Shaman was just so very, very strong. But let's let Aleco continue. Unfortunately, the state of the worst performing classes, Demon Hunter, Warrior, Paladin and Rogue, was alarming to us, and in some cases Warrior Demon Hunter was far below our bar for what we'd consider necessary for change. It is never our intention to have a class under a 40% win rate, and when these situations crop up on live, we have to attempt to address them swiftly. We understand there are risks involved when doing a high volume of changes, but we can always correct our mistakes in a future patch. We are committed to not leaving classes in bad states, and felt it was riskier to leave these classes untouched until the next patch cycle than it was to take a few steps at improving them early in the life of the new set. But this is a little bit curious because the early indications about like the effectiveness of those buffs, they were starting to push that Enrage Warrior, but starting to push that Token Paladin, that these buffs have not been very effective. These archetypes still don't seem that great. But we don't have a ton of data yet, and we don't have a ton of experimentation yet, so maybe over the next few days this will all work out exactly as they thought it would, but right now it doesn't look like these classes are actually improving that much. The total volume of changes per patch recently has been very high, and I want to clarify that this is our explicit goal to make big patches all the time now. That said, if we are faced with a similar situation in the future, multiple classes will build a win rate bar, we'd probably do another high volume patch like this one to try to set things right. We made a few misjudgments during final design in regards to classes like Warrior and Demon Hunter, and big patches like these are reflective of us attempting to correct those mistakes. While we're always trying to avoid mistakes in the first place, we won't shy away from fixing them after the fact if we need to. Now, few misjudgments during final design, this is very diplomatically said from Aleco, but I don't actually think many of those mistakes were made during final design. For Demon Hunter, yeah, I can totally see that. The relic package was not balanced properly, so the relic package is something that could be turned into perfectly playable package, but it just was too expensive, it just wasn't working. But then when we come to stuff like Warrior, when we come to stuff like Secret Rogue, for example, in one of my earlier videos I used the phrase to polish a turd. And like Enrage Warrior, Secret Rogue, trying to make these playable is like polishing a turd. Like the real mistakes were already done in the initial design, and final design trying to somehow scrape it all together, that's just not the way it works, even though Aleco here is being very diplomatic to his co-workers. There is a lot more where this came from, so let's continue. We're taking a few swings with this patch, notably the buff to Edwin. One of the interesting parts of the patch leak was that the Edwin buff was spotted early, and we had a chance to hear plenty of feedback from players about their concerns with the Edwin change before it made its way to live. I want to talk about the Edwin change in the context of a point of feedback on the patch that I don't fully disagree with, that this patch appears to be arriving at an awkward time. I don't agree with any of this stuff. I don't think the patch is arriving at an awkward time, but let's read through this all and then I will talk more about it. We had to lock in all of the changes for this patch a week ago, which was before any of the Masters Tour decks were posted and before the emergence of the Lambi series Rogue deck. I have to say that H-Crumbs built the same deck already, 2 cards different already on the first day, and like now it's already 2 cards different again, so is it any more Lambi Rogue either? Well, anyway. Props to H-Crumbs. At the time we locked in the changes, Rogue looked like it was in deep trouble and in need of some foundational help. A few days later, players were doing well with Rogue decks at the Masters Tour, and that story had changed. This is the risk we run. When attempting to react quickly to problems, there will be sometimes situations where developing situations change. If we could have watched the Masters Tour before locking in the Rogue balance changes, would we still have done the buff to Edwin? I don't think we would have, but I don't think that automatically makes this change bad for game health. My expectation is that the class will be powerful now. However, will it be too powerful? Was there a better change to make? We're shooting for Rogue to hit 50% win rate and thought we needed Edwin to get there. Obviously we can always revert Edwin in the future if need be. We'd like to be able to take the occasional stab at spicy changes like this, which reinforce the identity of a class, and if the feedback is ultimately that players don't like it, we're happy to pivot. Yeah, there's just so many things that I think is pretty wrong here. First of all, the performance of Rogue. I mean, I made a video about, hey, what sort of nerfs do I expect, way before any Masters Tour decks were released. And I said, okay, Rogue seems to need something for card draw. And yeah, Blizzard was on the right track with Edwin. But I never thought about buffing Edwin because Edwin was already doing great in the Rogue decks. And now Edwin is that significant outlier. It's now better than Wild Library was in Imp Warlock. Before Wild Library was nerfed, Edwin is now the card that is carrying Rogue decks. That said, it doesn't look like it's carrying Rogue decks to abnormally good performance. I mean, Rogue is strong, but Rogue is not an outlier. Rogue is not unbeatable, even with this version of Edwin. Still, I wanted to change like Shroud. Maybe that would have been a mistake too, who knows. But Shroud was the only card draw tool that they didn't change. And Shroud is now also considerably better than it was. But it's considerably better because it's tutoring for that Edwin, which is super card now. So changing Shroud, not changing Edwin, I still believe that would have been a superior approach to correcting Rogue's card draw issues without giving it too much power. And it didn't take Master's Tour, it didn't take any deck from Lambie to figure that out. It just didn't. So I really don't buy this story in that sense. So now the question is Rogue too powerful? And right now it doesn't yet look like Rogue is too powerful, but the decks are still being fine-tuned. It might turn out to be too powerful, but already it is clear that Edwin is a significant outlier and by a large margin the best card in that deck. And there's also some hints to the future in this one, so let's read on. Let's address the most notable exclusion from this patch, the Bran Kael'thas Denatur's combo. These 3 neutral legendaries have been very effective across multiple classes and are already causing some frustration among players. These cards are very much on our radar, and I think the odds that one or more of these cards eventually gets changed is high. Spoilers, upcoming nerfs, but we'll see. That said, we felt it was premature to nerf marquee cards from the new expansion, which are largely accomplishing their goals. They're exciting and they're ending games. That said, we're worried about the speed at which these cards are closing out games, and the play against frustration that is clearly present here. We're going to wait and see how they do in the new meta before making changes. I hope you all enjoyed the patch. I really do read all the feedback that comes my way. Please keep it coming. Deeply appreciate all the passion I see from this community on a daily basis. It's truly a privilege to be able to connect with you all through this amazing game. Love, Aleco. Okay, so there's some potential more nerfs coming. But overall, like, this insight into Blizzard's philosophy, Blizzard's logic, Blizzard's plan for this balance patch, it leaves me kind of like ambivalent. Because first of all, I think that Blizzard was correct in identifying a lot of issues. They were correct in identifying that, hey, these top decks aren't actually that strong. They're not like need of being destroyed here. And on the other hand, they were also correct in identifying that, hey, these weakest decks, they really need a lot of support. But the actual changes that they made, the choices that they made for this balance patch, I just don't agree with many of those. Like the Edwin buff, I think it was a mistake, and I think it was clearly visible. Like everyone knew immediately that it's a mistake, so how did it just go through at Blizzard? I don't know. Also, buffs to Warrior, buffs to like trying to push this token paladin idea. I'm not sure, maybe it's also part of like internal politics, because Enrage Warrior, Token Paladin, these are the decks that initial design wants to happen, so final design is desperately trying to make them happen. But once again, you can't polish a turd. If the initial design is not good, then final design really can't turn it into something really exciting. The best final design could do is make it playable, but sometimes making it playable might even be too costly for the fun of the game, so yeah, there's some considerable issues with that. Anyway, it's good to see some communications from Blizzard, and we'll see what the Hearthstone life is going to be in this brand new meta. Thank you for watching. Click like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and a special thanks to all of my Patreon supporters, YouTube members and Twitch subscribers who make all of these videos possible.